yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I'm okay with, like, I don't know, just kind of going with the flow and seeing what happens. I don't have a strict plan, but yeah, we'll see.
I think it's going to be absolutely riveting to watch people literally fall to pieces on camera.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. It's crazy that just as we're closing the file on the murder of Mo Wilson, a young world-class gravel rider, another case is blown up on the other side of the world regarding a pair of Olympic cyclists. A couple of world champions. Now, what's different with the murder of Mo Wilson compared to the fatal incident where Melissa Hoskins lost her life is that the one involved a love triangle, whereas the other involved two professional cyclists that you would think were a perfect match in terms of their abilities. What emerged in the ABC documentary 3 Shots in the Dark is not just how obsessively KAITLIN was in love with Colin Strickland, but also how she was made to feel that she was not an equal in the cycling sense. One of the most mysterious figures in this drama that played out in Austin was KAITLIN herself. I mean, I saw her. She was a woman who not once turned around in court during her murder trial to gauge her support or lack of. The documentary, to some extent, lifts the veil. We see photos and video of KAITLIN in a way that we've never really seen her before. We see her humanized. So what are the 5 things that stood out the most to me in this documentary as someone who went to attend the trial that has been covering this case from the very beginning? Well, before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're from Australia and you're interested in the Mo Wilson case, I'll put a link to the playlist in the description. There are 66, including the 67 videos dealing with that case. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So, number 1, the interrogation video. We've heard about the interrogation video, we've seen screen grabs of it, but for the first time we get an extended peek into that interview. She appears flat and emotionless. Well, now for the first time we hear her, and her answers are also monotonous, also flat.
Her being jealous or upset over him seeing Mariah, she kind of pops her head up, and that was the first time I saw any emotion from her.
It sounds like there were some issues between you and this girl, and I think that there's probably a lot more to it that you could help explain.
Have any idea
exactly,
that he saw or went out with this girl?
Okay, yeah.
Recently.
Has he been like talking to her on the side?
The documentary highlights how KAITLIN remained frozen, her body language very kind of rigid, with both hands tucked between her folded legs as questions are directed towards her. Uncomfortable assertions are kind of lobbed her way. For example, the fact that her vehicle was seen in the area of where the murder took place. So for the first time we see, when she's asked about her vehicle being spotted right by Maple Avenue at the time that Mo Wilson was killed, KAITLIN nods silently. It's a small nod, but she doesn't nod otherwise or anywhere else, and that did prove to be legally important. The video also shows a woman who looks fit and physically strong. You see it a little bit more than just in the photos of it. You can see she's a cool, calculating assassin. She's got her hair in blonde braids, whereas previously you see her hair in kind of red hair, and then of course brown hair when she was found in Costa Rica. If you compare KAITLIN to Colin and Mo, whose appearance is changing the most? Who is still struggling to find their identity? Another thing to note, does she look pregnant, as she claims now in a new bid for an appeal? when you see her in that cubicle, does she look pregnant? Does she sound pregnant? And I can't help thinking, by saying that, who is going to be alerted and perhaps sympathetic to her besides Colin? Is that a manipulative ploy, or is it the truth? Number 2, evidence photos. As some of you know, I visited the crime scene in Maple Avenue. I walked down that bamboo tunnel trying to visualize where KAITLIN threw Mo's bicycle. Well, the documentary reveals how and where it was found. If KAITLIN made a fatal mistake, besides committing the crime in the first place, her biggest boo-boo was likely carrying Mo's bicycle outside, from the inside of the apartment down the stairs and then kind of a little bit down the road, thereby leaving traces of herself, her DNA, on the bicycle seat and the handlebars. There can be no innocent explanation for this. This rash decision also reveals just how important bicycles were to the identities of everyone involved. A bicycle is literally part of the crime scene here, and that's no fluke. Everyone in the story was serious about cycling, and one I think felt that she wasn't being taken seriously. It was also a cycling app, or an app cyclists use, that allowed KAITLIN to track down her prey that night in Austin. Other crime scene photos were shown as well. Some I think I'd actually seen before. The most disturbing and important the public will never see, the autopsy photos. Those photos clearly show the determination of the shooter. Poor Mo was shot twice in the head and once point blank right through the heart. And I think that is also telling you what the shooter was thinking. You've broken my heart, I'm going to break yours. There was also a defensive wound, a finger cleaved open by a bullet aimed at her head. And that is a similar wound I've seen in autopsy photos from another case, the murder of Reva Steenkamp by Oscar Pistorius. Number 3, key informants reveal themselves. Well, there was Nicole Mertz, mutual friend of Colin and KAITLIN's, Chris Tolley, another mutual friend, and I think he gave an extensive interview either to Bicycling or to Outside. And then Andy Chasteen. Then there were also some friends who didn't reveal their names, or former teammates. Then there were also photos we'd never seen before. It's likely through Nicole Mertz, through this former bestie of KAITLIN's, the producers got their hands on images of KAITLIN in a former life, perhaps Facebook photos and the like, because KAITLIN deleted her Instagram, and so this was one other way, one alternative way that the producers could get hold of digital photos. In many of these photos, you see Nicole Mertz and KAITLIN having a glass of wine together. But also, it's clear from these images that cycling was a big part of who KAITLIN was. Number 5, relationship dynamics. What I always find fascinating in these cases is that after the courts have reached a finding and after the media have had their bite of the pie, is anyone really able to say what really happened? In other words, when everything is said and done, when everything has been analyzed, discussed, looked at, are we able to say what happened? Are we able to determine the reality of this case, of these people? Can you? I mean, the central question in this case is this. Was it a love triangle? We're told in this documentary that it wasn't. Colin said it wasn't. Mo's family said it wasn't. And KAITLIN, when interrogated, played down the fact that she even knew Mo's name, let alone knew who she was.
Not under arrest, okay?
Okay.
I know, it's a little crazy. Yeah, so
So they just came to my house and put me in handcuffs for no reason?
So there was some miscommunication on that. So, but I would really like to talk to you and clear some stuff up, because Colin did bring your name up, and I think there's a lot more information that you have that can kind of clear some stuff up. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I feel like I should have an attorney present.
So
I would love to leave.
You would love to
You just
leave.
arrested me in front of my house, in front of all of my neighbors, and carried me in here in handcuffs in front of downtown Austin. It was incredibly
I can only
humiliating.
imagine about what's happened over the past 24 hours.
Colin walked in the house and said one of the women in the cycling community passed away.
Yes.
Just passed away.
So there you can hear KAITLIN sort of minimizing her knowledge of Mo, minimizing even the fact of that she knew what had happened to Mo, even minimizing Mo's death, right? And so KAITLIN is very good at playing down all of this. Do you notice even when she said how deeply humiliated she felt, she says it without any emotion. I felt deeply humiliated, right? Most people would say that with emphasis. And so why does she do that? Why does she play down the fact? Well, because KAITLIN had actually called Mo directly and told her to stay away, and Mo then told Colin about it. KAITLIN was obsessively following Mo's and Colin's social media and spying on Colin by checking on his texts on their laptop. We don't know everything in those texts, but I wouldn't be surprised if they at turns infuriated KAITLIN and broke her heart. The other thing is we don't know what was on Mo's phone. We don't know what was in her heart. We don't know what was on Colin's phone, or really what was in his heart. But one can only guess at that. The fact remains that on the night Mo was murdered, just hours earlier, Colin's housemate and sometimes boyfriend was secretly swimming with her and then having a secret meal with her. Also, as mentioned, Mo had been warned directly by KAITLIN to stay away from her man. Mo had also been warned by Amity Rockville, her best friend, who was a similar age, who'd had a relationship with Colin, about the kind of guy Colin was. Amity knew Colin because she'd been in a rocky relationship with him once upon a time. So in reality, what may have appeared to be, let's say, a love triangle in limbo, that Colin wasn't having a relationship with Mo, Mo wasn't having a relationship with Colin, and Colin wasn't having a relationship with KAITLIN. Meanwhile, wasn't it really about a guy who couldn't make up his mind, which then led to two women jostling for position to try to help him make up his mind. So again, let's go back to that question. Was it a love triangle? Well, Mo knew it and Colin knew it. I think the public perception in this case is closer to the money than any of the mainstream narratives. I don't think KAITLIN committed murder simply because she overreacted. I think she did overreact, but I don't think it was simply because she overreacted. I think she'd overreacted before. This time she was overreacting on the basis of a timeline, on the basis of quite a long experience. Bear in mind, Colin and Mo had had a 10-day fling previously in Austin. And I think KAITLIN knew that Mo was a serious threat to her continued living with Colin. That was under threat. And their relationship, that was under threat, especially if and when they did things like this. Don't worry, Mo's not a big threat to you, but then you go out and you have a meal with her. I do think what this says a lot about is the human capacity, perhaps from all three people in the story, to be in denial about what is really going on. Colin was in denial because his relationship with KAITLIN wasn't really working, wasn't really what he wanted. It was a relationship of convenience. Mo was in denial because Colin wasn't actually available, right? He was living with this other person. And KAITLIN was in denial, certainly when she committed the crime, that by committing the crime, she could go back to her life as normal. What's also interesting is that Colin in court seemed to deny that he was in a relationship with KAITLIN as well, emphasizing that at the time of the murder, they were sleeping in separate rooms. But an article in Outside suggested the two spent the night not only in the same room, but in the same bed. This is on the night of the murder, on the night of the murder, after the murder occurred. And they were regularly intimate. That wasn't the unusual part, but the forcefulness of the intimacy that night was. Personally, I think the solution to the crime is if at any moment any one of the three people in this triangle had come out of denial, well then all three lives could basically have been saved. KAITLIN could have left Colin, Colin could have left KAITLIN, and Mo could have arrived in Austin and just let sleeping dogs lie. So I'm not going to take it further than that. What do you think? Do you think there was a love triangle? Do you think it's been overstated? Do you think it's relevant? Do you think it's not? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.